Good afternoon. My name is Weronika Gasior, and I'm a Finance and Operations Officer in Léargas, working across all fields of education and training. This pre-recorded session is a part of the Project Management Day aimed at providing you with information on both contractual and financial requirements for beneficiaries who successfully submitted their mobility applications under KA121 and KA122 across school, adult education, and vocational education and training. Before I proceed with my presentation, I would like to congratulate you on behalf of Léargas on your successful application. We are looking forward to working with you and supporting your projects. This pre-recorded session will cover your contractual obligations when managing your Erasmus Plus mobility project. The presentation you will see on your screen will highlight those parts and articles of your grant agreement which importance we wish to emphasize. Your grant agreement is a legally binding document between you, the beneficiary of the Erasmus Plus program, and Léargas, the national agency. The aim of your grant agreement is to ensure a smooth management of your project. Your grant agreement clearly defines your roles and responsibilities, obligations of other beneficiaries such as consortium members, and the national agency. It clarifies what projects are to do and when, and confirms all changes recommended to your project during the evaluation and contracting process. Your grant agreement is split into several sections and annexes, including the main body of the grant agreement, which is called Special Conditions, Annex 1, General Conditions, Addendum to the grant agreement, which covers regulations regarding implementation of virtual activities due to COVID-19, Annex 2, which includes description of the project and its estimated budget, Annex 3, with financial and contractual rules, Annex 4, which includes applicable rates for unit cost, Annex 5 with mandates which are only applicable to KA121 consortium projects, and finally Annex 6, which consists of templates for grant agreements between beneficiary and participants of mobility activities. There are several articles in special conditions that we wish to highlight to you, and these are Article 1.2, which states duration of your project, its start and end date. All your project activities, including preparations, actual travel, actual mobility and debriefing, etc., must take place between the clearly defined start and end date, otherwise they will be deemed ineligible. Activity dates must happen within project's timeframes. Article 1.3 specifies the amount of your awarded grant, which might be slightly different from amount you originally applied for. During the evaluation phase, the national agency assesses your grant request and might introduce some reductions when it feels that some requested costs are ineligible or incorrectly applied. Please note that for KA122 projects, the awarded grant cannot be increased in any circumstances. Article 1.17 and Article 2.22 will provide details on allowable budget transfers which do not require a formal amendment to the grant agreement. Special conditions very clearly define your project's payment and reporting arrangements, both in Article 1.4. Grant agreements are issued to beneficiaries in 2 copies. Once they are signed by the legal representative of your organization, they are returned to Léargas to be co-signed by our Executive Director. Once our Executive Director co-signs 2 copies of the grant agreement, a first pre-financing payment is raised and made to the project's bank account as specified in Article 1.5. In majority of cases, the first pre-financing payment represents 70% of the total awarded grant. Up to 30% is then paid to the project upon the receipt and successful evaluation of its final report. The national agency has a certain number of days to make relevant payments. It is 30 days from the signature of the contract for the first payment and 60 days from the receipt of the final report for the final payment. Some projects might have a different payment schedule. Organizations that have weaker financial capacity, poor liquidity, poor track record in terms of repayment of refunds, late reporting, etc., may be subject to a different payment structure at the discretion of Léargas. All KA1 projects include the submission of participants' reports and a final beneficiary report after the project has ended. You may also need to submit progress or interim reports depending on the payment structure for your project. Your grant agreement includes information on the reporting structure for your project and the deadlines for report submission in Article 1.4. You will have 60 days from the end date of your project to submit your final report via the beneficiary module, which is an online monitoring and reporting tool. By submitting the final report, you are requesting a final payment to be made to your project. The final report is evaluated against quality criteria in line with the approved project and scored up to 100 points. If a final report is recognized as of poor quality, partial or late implementation, a reduction to its organizational support may happen if the project scores below 60 points. It is vital that you do provide as much as possible information on the implementation of your project to showcase its quality, benefits, and achievements. Interim report is submitted during the project and is closely linked to project stage payment structure. Interim report is NA's way to monitor your project's quality implementation, but also financial expenditure over a defined period of time, which is clearly stated in Article 1.4.3. By submitting an interim report, beneficiaries request that further pre-financing payment is made to their bank account during the project. Such pre-financing payment is indeed made once the report passes the evaluation, and also when it shows that beneficiaries spent at least 70% of the first pre-financing made to the project upon the signature of the grant agreement. Beneficiaries are allowed to submit an interim report either by deadline or when the 70% rule is fulfilled, which means that an interim report can be also submitted before the deadline specified in the grant agreement. In a situation when the interim report is due, but beneficiary's expenditure is still below 70% threshold, the interim report needs to be provided for evaluation purposes, and a further one will be then requested once the 70% threshold is met. Article 1.5 provides details of your project's bank details. You will find it on signature page of your grant agreement. It is essential to let us know if your project's bank details change. Such change requires a formal amendment to the grant agreement, and it is vital that the national agency makes payments to correct and valid bank accounts. It is very important that you do understand our and your responsibilities regarding processing of personal data. For that reason, please read carefully Article 1.6, 1.7, and 1.8 of Special Conditions, as well as Article 2.7 of General Conditions. These articles will give you an overview of a data controller, definitions of communication details, means, and their format for both you as the beneficiary and Léargas as the national agency. They will also highlight your duty to ensure compliance of your data processing with relevant EU regulation, also in relation to personal data of participants in your mobility projects. Since your successful project is a mobility project, you are required to implement effective procedures and arrangements that will ensure safety and protection of your project's participants, including health and safety requirements, carrying out risk assessment on travel, receiving organization, accommodations, or implementing safeguarding measures where necessary. You are also obliged to ensure that insurance coverage is provided to participants of your mobility projects, and where these participants are minors, that you fully respect regulations on their protection and safety as per relevant legislation in both sending and hosting countries, including, but not limited to, parental and guardian consent, insurance arrangements, and age limits. You are also obliged to provide financial support to participants by selecting one of the three options given to you in the grant agreement. In addition, if your project has funds for inclusion support awarded, then as the beneficiary, you are obliged to ensure that adequate pre-financing is provided to participants with fewer opportunities. It is important that these participants may not be requested to personally pre-finance their activities. When managing Erasmus Plus Mobility Project, you will become familiar with the beneficiary module, which is Erasmus Plus Monitoring and Management Tool, created to support beneficiaries in encoding their activities, participants, and reporting projects expenditure. You are contractually obliged to update the tool on a regular basis. This will help you to maintain a clear overview of your project's progress. While the use of Erasmus Plus reporting and management tool is compulsory, the use of Erasmus Plus project results platform is not. However, it is a good way of showcasing your project and its results, including any tangible deliverables that may be produced as part of your project. Whether you are directly responsible for the management of your project or promoting the funding opportunities available, you are required to use the European Commission Erasmus Plus emblem and associated wording for any project outputs and promotional materials produced, and to publicly acknowledge the support received from the European Union, which includes events, conferences, seminars, etc. When acknowledging the support received, there is a range of ways to display the emblem, wording, and disclaimer, and relevant guidelines are provided through the link included in the Article 1.13. General Conditions Annex 1 to the main body of your grant agreement starts with 3 important articles, which provide definition of various terms used in the grant agreement, describe your roles and responsibilities as a beneficiary, coordinating partner, and a consortium member, where applicable, and define how the official communication between different parties involved in the project should look like. As is the nature of projects such as these, several changes may take place throughout the project life cycle. If anything unexpected occurs, please communicate it clearly to Léargas to see what can be done. It will often be the case that these changes can be accounted for through amendments to your grant agreement, which could include changes as large as project activities or as small as bank account details. Amendment requests need to be made in writing directly to DNA, have to be justified, sought before the relevant activity takes place, and at least 1 month before the end date of the project. Where necessary, they should be accompanied by a supporting documentation. The amendment process is clearly outlined in the next slide. It involves completion of an amendment request formed by the beneficiary, its assessment and further approval or decline by the national agency. If a proposed change requires a formal amendment to the grant agreement, 2 copies of the amended articles will be issued to your legal representative, and once signed, they will be returned to us, co-signed by Léargas Executive Director, and 1 copy will be returned to you, while the other one will be kept on file in Léargas. There are several changes always requiring a formal amendment to the grant agreement, and these are, among others, change of the legal representative, change to the duration of the project, change of bank details, change of the legal status and address of the beneficiary, and some budget changes. In cases where mobilities could not go ahead due to unforeseeable circumstances beyond the participant's control and not due to his or her negligence or error, and if you incurred expenditure which you cannot now recover, you may wish to apply for force majeure. Application for force majeure has to be submitted in writing using a force majeure request form. The request needs to be duly justified and accompanied by supporting documentation if and where needed. We currently strongly advise that before booking any travel or accommodation or any other project activities, you do check the relevant government guidance and support channels as part of your project's risk management. Articles 2.16 and 2.17 of General Conditions clearly specify in what circumstances suspension or early termination of the project might happen. Both suspension or early termination of the project and grant agreement might happen at any point at the request of both the beneficiary and the national agency. In both instances, a formal notification will be required. What really is essential to understand here is the importance of communication between the project and the national agency. We would like you to keep communication channels open and to let us know about any issues or problems you may come across and experience during your project. Part B of the General Conditions also includes several important articles. Some of them have already been covered here, therefore, for the purposes of this session, we would like to highlight the importance of the following ones. Article 2.23 emphasizes the need for timely submission of your reports. Failure to submit reports or submit them on time may result in your project being suspended or terminated and a recovery of your grant. If you anticipate any delays with the submission of any of your project reports, please do communicate this to us in advance. Article 2.27 lists all potential checks your project may be subject to from either the national agency or relevant external bodies such as the Commission themselves or the European Court of Auditors. Those checks are always communicated in advance. Please note that all your project documentation needs to be kept for 5 years after Léargas makes the final payment to your project, unless your awarded grant was lower than 60,000, in which case the period for keeping project's documentation is limited to 3 years after the date of the final payment. For all projects funded in 2021, the grant agreement will include an addendum. This addendum is a direct result of the impact COVID-19 had and still might have on mobility projects. The Commission, recognizing significant barriers in delivery of project activities during the pandemic, proposed some flexible measures, including the possibility of delaying planned physical activities and, as a result of force majeure, carrying out planned physical activities via virtual means. This addendum is a response to the second option and outlines financial and contractual implications of organizing virtual activities instead of physical ones. Both the grant agreement and the addendum are to be signed by your project's legal representative in 2 copies and sent back to Léargas for the signature of our executive director. Once co-signed, 1 copy of the grant agreement and the addendum will be returned to you, and 1 will be kept on file in Léargas. We recommend that you do carry out a risk assessment of your project activities and their original timeframes in order to decide how to proceed with your planned mobilities. If you decide to organize a blended mobility, you will need to complete a blended/virtual activity request form, which will be further reviewed and feedback will be provided by the national agency. Annex 2 for Key Action 122 projects includes description of the project by referencing original application, and it also provides a breakdown of your awarded grant as well as details of the beneficiary. Annex 2 for Key Action 121 projects is structured slightly differently. It includes the following information: project details such as a project code and accreditation code, breakdown of awarded grant for standard costs, which are based on unit cost, and inclusion support and exceptional costs, which are both based on real costs. It also includes a list of indicative targets for which the above breakdown was awarded and details of participating organizations. Annex 3, Financial and Contractual Rules, is a very important document which defines conditions for eligibility of costs, rules regarding the use of unit cost and real cost, which outlines when they are eligible and what evidence you need to keep for each awarded cost. Annex 3 will provide you also with very clear guidance on when your grant might be reduced and outline different types of check that can be performed in respect to your project by Léargas. Annex 4 lists applicable rates for travel, individual support, organizational support, linguistic support, inclusion support, preparatory visits, and course fees. These are the same rates which you will be using when reporting your project costs in the beneficiary module, Erasmus Plus Reporting and Management tool. What you will find in Annex 5 are mandates. This annex is only applicable to Key Action 121 consortium projects. Mandates are in fact letters of intent confirming the willingness of the beneficiary and consortium members to participate in the project. Each mandate is signed by your legal representative and also the legal signatory of relevant consortium member. In a majority of cases, mandates included in this annex are the same as those submitted with the application form, unless some details change during the period between the application submission and the contracting process. Annex 6 includes templates for agreements between beneficiary and participants. We do recommend that you use them to clarify your and participants' expectations and role, outline program of mobilities, and regulate provision of financial support to participants. 2 templates will be available to use between beneficiaries and participants of mobility activities across all fields of education: school, adult education, and vocational education and training, and these are grant agreement for traineeship studies and staff and learning agreement. These will be provided to you in both hard and soft copy. I would like to thank you for your attention and wish you good luck with your projects. We are here to support you, so please do not hesitate to contact us if you have any questions related to Erasmus Plus program or any of your projects. We are really looking forward to working with you. Thank you so much.